abortion is an assault on the image of God. And, we as Christians need to be standing up and telling the truth about abortion. But then on the other end, we've got to, be compassionate and non-judgmental in pursuing these women and having resources for them so that they can, find healing and their lives too can be redeemed.
Hi, I'm Liberty McCarter, host of the Know Why podcast. Let's jump into today's Point of View Highlights episode. And we have a life-filled, a life-focused show for you today. I'm so excited about the interviews. We have Jeff and Tricia Bradford in the first hour. I'm about to talk with them. Jeff is the president of Human Coalition, which if you're a listener of Point of View, you've heard that name before. And Tricia is an ordained worship leader, entrepreneur, and advocate for preborn life. And together, they are the co-authors of this wonderful book, Beauty from Ashes, A Christian Couple's Journey from Abortion to Redemption. Jeff and Tricia, I'm so excited that you have joined Point of View, and I'm looking forward to our conversation today. Thanks for being here.
It's our honor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Liberty.
Well, as the subtitle of your book states, which if people are interested in reading that, we have a link at pointofview.net, so you can easily find it there. But abortion is a part of your story as a couple, and you've been so open and vulnerable with that testimony. And so I thank you for that, because I think it really is impacting lives. And it seems, as I was reading the story, that like so many of our decisions in life, unfortunately, there is a lot of fear and worry and past pain that goes into some of those decisions. So would you mind giving us, an overview of that story and that part of your lives and what went into that decision?
Sure, Liberty. It's great to be with you. I'll start with that. And this is a book that we never wanted to write. We never even wanted to tell our story. And for 17 plus years, we never talked about it because of the deep shame and regret that comes along with taking the life of your child. If you can imagine that pain, I don't know if we've ever experienced anything like that before. And so we hit it deeply, even though, as you mentioned in the beginning, that Tricia was an ordained worship leader. I was helped start and build and grow a church. We led organizations, and we thought we were living our lives for Christ, and we were doing our best, but yet this was the one issue that we never talked about because of no one talked about it. And even though we led from the front of the church and sat in the pews for many, many years, because no one talked about the issue of abortion, we felt like it was the unforgivable sin. And so for many years, Tricia and I didn't talk about it. I told one person, my best friend from high school, who we've been friends for 40 years, and I remember weeping so much trying to tell him the story, because when you take a life, you can never get that back. And although we know that we've been forgiven, the pain of that decision never goes away.
Mm. And Tricia, this is something that at that time, according to the story that you've written, there was a lot of fear surrounding that decision, fear of what others might think, even a lack of guidance from people that you trusted. Did you feel alone during that time and then in the years afterward?
For sure. Of course, I did a pretty good job of, sweeping it under the rug. But, that's kind of what shame does, and fear. Just because you sweep something under the rug doesn't make it go away. And so, Jeff and I struggled. I mean, we had our own trust issues after that for years. And so, I just kind of lived in silence. I buried my emotions thinking, that if I didn't talk about it, maybe the guilt and shame would just, go away, but it never did. And so I carried that wound into my marriage, into motherhood, and it affected how I saw myself and how I showed up for my family. And so, when Jeff and I started talking about, writing this book, I was very hesitant, and because I knew it would mean reliving one of the most painful experiences of my life. And so it would mean, being vulnerable and honest and about something that I kept hidden for so long. And so, it was, that the whole trust issue, it just seeps into all the relationships. You're afraid of trusting anybody with that kind of information. So it's, but here we are. And and as a Christian, I know God has forgiven me, and I know that he sees me, and he knows me, and he loves me. And, what else could I do but share the love of God and how he's shown up in my life and has redeemed my life? And so here we are, writing a book and wanting to share in hopes that another woman or another father that has experienced this would also, go to the Lord and start their healing journey.
And it really is a testament of, as I was reading this book, just the Lord's goodness, and that testimony is so powerful because you are so honest. And we're about to go to a break, but we will continue over the hour to allow you both to tell your testimony and your story. But if you, Tricia, I know you mentioned you hope that this book will give hope and encouragement to maybe somebody else who's been in a similar situation. Have you heard feedback or received, any comments from anyone about reading this book or hearing your story and the encouragement that they've received? Because I know this is an issue, especially in the church, that many people deal with, but it's not talked about very often.
Yeah,
yes.
I can jump in, Tricia.
Jeff, do you want to answer that?
The story as well, but just yesterday, I got a call from a lady or a message from one of our nurses for a lady who read our book that had been in an unplanned pregnancy and in a similar situation, and she read our book, and she said she was so encouraged by the transparency and the message of the book that it just encouraged her to write her own story, and that she'd been reluctant to do that until she read the book. And so that was a fantastic testimony. And, Liberty, I've had so many men that have come up to me and said, that they had compartmentalized and shoved their abortion or helping someone, procure an abortion. And they had stuffed it so deep that they had not thought about it. And this was bringing healing to them because of the story. And so things like that just make a huge impact for us.
So in sort of the middle of your book, you have chapters 6 through 9. There are several breakthroughs that I think, it seems to me anyways, kind of build on each other. And of course, we know that the enemy wants to keep our secrets in darkness, but there's more freedom. And so you experienced more and more light surrounding this issue that had affected your marriage and your lives. So can you talk about some of those breakthroughs, those steps of confession and bringing that issue out into the open, and how that changed things for you?
Sure. I'll start, babe, unless you want to take this. I think one of the things that we would probably both share with you, we have attended the Village Church under Matt Chandler. Many know Matt and the church. And when our children, I forgot what year it was, but when they were, our two oldest were 8th and 9th grade, Matt was talking about a sermon that was about being fully known and fully loved by God. And that particular message that morning hit us really hard. I had started helping with what's now Human Coalition, and so we felt after that message that we needed to share with our two oldest children about the abortion. And so that Sunday afternoon, we called them into our bedroom, and we sat them down, and we shared with them that we took the life of their oldest sister through an abortion before we got married. And I do cry fairly easily when it comes to this issue. It's something that's still painful, and sharing that in the vulnerability and telling your children something like that was the hardest conversation as a father that I'd ever had. And yet we wanted them to know that no matter what they did, that God would still love them. There's nothing that they could do that would separate them from him. And we also wanted them to know that we would love them the way that the Lord loves us, unconditionally, no matter what. And so we wanted to do that, to create the transparency and the understanding of God's love for us. And so that was a huge moment for us. And, Tricia, I don't know if there's anything you want to add on that.
I apologize. That was really good, babe. For me as a wife, and, having children and, I went through many, lots of mood swings. And, for years, I never attributed those to the abortion. And so it was a really kind of a confusing time, even though I'm walking in, being a Christian, I'm leading worship, we're living our lives. But there were many times that I would just have, such, bad behavior, that I was like, Lord, what is underneath all of this? Where's this coming from? This is not who you've called me to be. This is surely not who I want to be as a wife and as a mother. And, he slowly, gently just, took me through a very long process of knowing who he is and then understanding who I was in him. And then, of course, the day that we landed in counseling, and having that counselor ask, if I've ever had an abortion. And it was, oh, my goodness, how did you know? How did you know? One, the Lord must have prepared your heart to even ask that question. But that's when, through that conversation, that everything started to really make sense. Of just because everything was just, began to spiral. And so it was in that counseling room, that, we began to be honest and began to, connect the dots. It was really difficult, but, we're on the other side of that now. And we just want to help others that, to also experience the healing and the freedom in Christ.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. Thank you both so much for sharing these things with us. And I can't imagine how hard that conversation would be, Jeff. But I also just, I admire that because I have young children now, but I can already imagine, I don't want to be completely honest with them about everything. And that is a really hard thing to do. But I think that is so important and just such an example to set. Tricia, I wanted to ask you specifically about the Bible study that you went through on healing from abortion, because we know that this impacts at least 1 in 4 women, including in the church. And there aren't a whole lot of resources like this, but can you talk a little bit about kind of the healing that you went through with that specific study?
Sure. The name of the study that I went through was called Surrendering the Secret. And it was very difficult, but in order to start that healing process, I had to learn the truth about abortion. And so in the very beginning of the study, it basically asked how would you define abortion? And I walked through that. It was with a lady, and matter of fact, I should make a point that the lady who wrote Surrendering the Secret, she had had an abortion and hadn't told anyone for 30 years. Mm. It was 30 years that she was finally honest with someone, and that she confided in that she had had an abortion. And that's a lot of women. Most women don't tell a soul. Mm. But as I went through the Surrendering the Secret, it was very difficult. And of course, it was many years ago. But I know, at the end of it, we ended up having a funeral. And it was, we had a pastor come and just to, honor our child. And it was very difficult. But it also just, brought more healing and understanding. And I highly recommend going through a post-aborted Bible study, like a Surrendering of the Secret. I think that's really important. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think too, Liberty, through that process in praying, Tricia felt like the Lord put on her heart the name Sarah. And that was important because, this is a person. She has a name.
Yes.
And we were able, to honor her, and, she's one of our children. And so that was really cathartic for us and healing, even though that process for Tricia was really difficult. And I didn't go through that with her. My healing journey really came in being able to do the work at Human Coalition. And I'll just add to this overall conversation that there are very few, if any, woman that really ever really wants an abortion. They want someone to stand in the gap and be with them and love them and see them and pursue them and say, you can do this. You may know, Liberty, that even the women who believe that abortion is their only option, 76% of those women will say that they would prefer to parent. They just need somebody to say you can.
Their book, Beauty from Ashes. So we have talked about Jeff and Tricia, the first part of your story, and how there really is freedom in the truth and bringing things into the light. And that's where the healing began to happen for both of you. And then something that maybe you didn't expect, Jeff, there was an opportunity to work for something called Online for Life, which later became the Human Coalition. So can you tell us about the very beginnings of the ministry that you now lead and how you got involved with it?
Yeah, it's a pretty miraculous story, and how Human Coalition was birthed, and really how God called me into this. As I think I may have mentioned, it's the last thing that I thought I would ever be doing, because I did not want to do it. In fact, we kind of felt like Jonah running, and the Lord calling me into this. And so what Tricia mentioned, that we found ourselves in Christian counseling one one day after really a tsunami of things that we talk about in the book that really hit our lives, including the church splitting and losing our church family. The recession of 08-09 was really hard on a lot of people in the church and us. And so that week when we went into Christian counseling, we closed the door and Tricia began to cry like I had never seen her before, almost just hysterically. And as we got underneath those tears and that pain from the decision of the abortion. Well, a couple of days later, two of the other co-founders of Online for Life, now Human Coalition, handed me a card that said, "We save," or a card that was Online for Life, and told me that our mission is to save babies from abortion using the internet. Mm. I remember just kind of bowing my head and saying, "Lord, what are you doing?" And that was not a coincidence. God just opened my eyes to the issue of abortion, and I was intrigued by really a vision of how to reach women that no one else was doing at that time. The internet seems like forever ago, but no one was using it to reach women who were searching for an abortion, to procure an abortion online. And so we started that work, and I ended up, because God just kind of brought all this together for me this one week, I started volunteering and helping, was eventually on the board. But one week, it really, not intentionally, but I watched Schindler's List. And if you remember at the end of that movie, Schindler, towards the end of the war, he was talking to all the Jewish families that he had helped save, and they presented him a ring. Mm. And inscribed on that ring was a Talmudic phrase that saving one life changes the world entire.
Wow.
And that just struck me. I was like, okay, mm-hmm. I've got to do something more. And so I took off 90 days to help raise $1 million. And I said, this is a no-brainer. We basically created a predictive model that by using the internet and the metrics that we had, we could predict how many babies we could save by the amount of money we raised. And so I went out and all of us started fundraising to raise that $1 million. And we worked really hard for those 90 days, and people thought it was amazing, really encouraging us. But we raised $14,000. Mm. So I was a little short of my $1 million goal. Yeah. And because I'm a finance major, I realized how important zeros are. Mm-hmm. And we were a number of zeros short. But God got us on our knees and began to just really pray every Saturday morning. And about 9 months later, a family from Texas heard about our work and ended up funding our first 2 years, which was a $3.4 million plan. And so God showed up eventually, and he's never early, but he's never late. And he was just right on time. And so that was really the beginning of this work, and God showing up, and he continues to show up every day for us to save the next baby and care for the next mom. And so we do everything we can to reach women who think abortion is their only option and bring them into a system of care where they're loved on. It'll stand in the gap and provide real help and hope, things like housing, education, employment, child care assistance. These are the areas and services that these women need help with. And so it's an amazing ministry. I pinch myself some days that I get to do this kind of work. And it's just been God's grace and goodness.
Yes. And I love the work of Human Coalition. I was so impressed when I first heard of it because, as we know, there are pregnancy resource centers that have been around for many, many years, and they're loving on women and serving so many. But there is sometimes a barrier with reaching the women who are truly abortion-minded, even if it's for, reasons that they don't want, but they feel like they have no other option. So for people who may not be familiar, tell us what the basic concept is of how Human Coalition really intercepts these women with hope whenever they are in this spot.
Yeah, our laser focus is reaching women online. And so that's one of the areas that we've are really are experience of internet marketing is really where we began. And so over the last almost 13 years, have done amazing work to be able to reach women who are online procuring an abortion, searching for the pill now. Over 73% of all abortions are chemical abortions.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think about that, the abortion clinic is now at the home of this woman in her bathroom. And so these are the things that we have to deeply understand why she's searching for this and how to reach her online and bring her in that system of care, and then partner with great pregnancy centers like Jennifer Shelton, who is going to be on your show, and just working hand in hand. But we need to reach these women, over 1 million women a year who are headed to the abortion clinic, reaching them. We not only bring them into a system of care, but they're what we call speed to nurse. How do we get them to a nurse immediately so we can begin to counsel her for life under a doctor's license? And nurses are one of the most well-respected, so they can get the truth and help that they need in order to empower them to choose life. And then we help with what we call continuum of care, where we curated over 10,000 organizations to provide those deeper levels of care, like housing and education, employment assistance, and child care assistance, and things like that. And so it's a beautiful mix of work that we're able to come alongside these women, and we get to hear the stories of moms that say, thank you. I almost took the life of my child. I can't imagine what my life would have been like without this little baby. And we get to see her holding that new baby, and it's amazing work.
Yes, so wonderful. And I just want to emphasize the continuum of care that you mentioned, because I know that, with just women that I happen to know in my own community or have worked with through church, that there is so many factors that go into that fear or decision of, I want to have this baby, but how will I pay for childcare? How will I continue my education and get a job? And that is just such an amazing resource that you will help her, not just until her baby's born, but even after, and say, we really will support you and walk alongside you. And we've got just a few minutes before the break, and then we'll come back and we'll finish up the interview. But in about the minute left, there is actually legislation, too, that states can implement, and that Human Coalition has been a part of writing, that helps states even partner even better with women in this position. Is that right?
Absolutely, and that's one of our core pillars at Human Coalition. I mean, we work directly with women who are planning to abort, and then we work on the legislation advocacy side. And so we have state contracts in about 7 states where states are looking to help women who are searching for an abortion. Exactly the program that I described, a state can help fund those initiatives and those programs to bring into their state to care for moms. We also add on 2 other elements to that when we do state contracts, one what we call benefit services. And so this is where states can help moms who are, at the poverty level or struggling with jobs and housing and education, but also with TANF and WIC and SNAP and Medicaid, those kinds of benefits that we help service those state by state. And then here in Texas, we also run a maternal health program so that we can help with healthy babies and healthy moms.
And right before the break, Jeff was telling us just about the amazing ways that Human Coalition partners with states to provide support for mothers through the continuum of care. So even after that child is born and the mother chooses life, she can continue to receive support. And something that Jeff mentioned, and I know Chelsea has mentioned on this show multiple times, is that so the majority of women, Jeff, I believe you said 76%, prefer to parent if they have the support that they need. And so Human Coalition is helping to provide that support. But before we talk about some of the work that Human Coalition is doing specifically a little bit more, Tricia, I wanted to ask you about the church issue. I know this is something you both write about in your book, how you both grew up in Bible Belt Christianity, so to speak, but this was never an issue that you heard teaching from the pulpit, that you ever heard churches really address. And that is a huge need for churches to step in and address the issue of abortion and pro-life advocacy and abortion healing. So, Tricia, what's your message to Christians in church or pastors who are listening?
That is the question for churches. You know, there are pastors that talk about this issue very well, like a Matt Chandler. But we need more pastors that will, not stand down. You know, abortion is an assault on the image of God. And, we as Christians need to be standing up and telling the truth about abortion. But then on the other end, we've got to, be compassionate and non-judgmental in pursuing these women and having resources for them so that they can, find healing and their lives too can be redeemed. And they can share their testimonies because there is power in one's testimony. And it's the power of that testimony that can transform, hearts and minds. And so for pastors, we pray that, they will have a fear of God more than a fear of man, to talk on the issue of abortion. Because in this day and age, abortions are they're not necessarily and Jeff, you would know this, decreasing. And right. We need to save more lives. We need to see abortion ended in our lifetime. I mean, and that's our prayer. Mm. We want to see abortion ended. And I know everyone does. These are precious lives and precious families. And generational, a generational curse that just needs to come to an end.
Absolutely. And Jeff, what resources does Human Coalition provide? I know you mentioned partnering with local governments and states to help provide aid, but do you also equip ministry leaders and church leaders to be able to engage with this issue in a better way?
We do, and I want to make sure we're clear too. I mean, we work both with private and public. We have many private donors that help provide the care and the hope that Human Coalition, programs provide women and children. We work with states and we work with churches. And so we have a whole church team that works with local churches to help educate and mobilize those churches to action. And so we do that through multiple ways and partner with other organizations as well, like an Embrace Grace, who does an elaborate baby shower at a church and does mentoring. So we work with other organizations as well as our own team who comes in and helps educate and activate pastors to encourage them that, as you mentioned before, it's about 37% of women in the church have experienced abortion, and that means the men have too. And so how do we make sure that those people that are sitting in the pews are being ministered to? And so how do we help pastors do that? Many are afraid to talk about this subject because it's been politicized, or they're afraid of offending someone. But the reality of it is, as Tricia mentioned, this is an assault on God, on the image of God, the Imago Dei. And it is, as Christians, obligated that we talk about this winsomely and gracefully so that healing can occur. And this breaks God's heart, and it should break our heart as Christians, that we are taking the life of our children in the womb. And so pastors, help heal your congregation, and healing won't happen until we begin to talk about this. And Liberty, this is one of the reasons we wrote the book and why we wrote it so transparently, talking about the issues in our lives, so that we would say that transparency builds trust. And one of the reasons that pastors and churches sometimes lack that is because we're not being transparent about our own issues, so that those that are in the congregation feel safe to be known and to be fully loved by God. And so that's the message that we hope that people will hear, that you're fully known and fully loved, and that pastors, we hope that you will continue to be transparent and talk about this issue so that healing can occur in your congregation.
Amen. Well, it has been such an honor, Jeff and Tricia, speaking with both of you today. And thank you for writing your story and sharing it so transparently. And thank you for the work that you're doing through Human Coalition, which has rescued over 33,000 babies from abortion and is doing work to help women and families every single day. So I encourage all of our listeners to support Human Coalition. Go to humancoalition.org, or you can find the links on our website. And it's a great way to get involved with the pro-life movement. But Jeff and Tricia, again, thank you both for being with Point of View today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Yes. So you can get their book, Beauty from Ashes, A Christian Couple's Journey from Abortion to Redemption. Amazing testimony, amazing story. And we have that link for you at pointofview.net. Well, that's all we have time for today. We'll see you next time on Point of View Highlights. Thanks so much for listening to today's Point of View Highlights. I'm Liberty McCarter, host of the Know Why podcast, a weekly podcast for young adults who want to know why they believe what they believe. If you have young adults in your life who would like more meaningful conversations like this, send them over to knowwhypodcast.com. And we'll see you next time on Point of View Highlights.